Costa's audiobook presents The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Part 3, Book 7, Alyosha. Chapter 1, The Breath of Corruption. The body of Father Zossima was prepared for burial according to the established ritual. As is well known, the bodies of dead monks and hermits are not washed. In the words of the church ritual, if any one of the monks depart in the Lord, the monk designated shall wipe the body with warm water, making first the sign of the cross with a sponge on the forehead of the deceased, on the breast, on the hands and feet, and on the knees, and that is enough. All this was done by Father Piercy, who then clothed the deceased in his monastic garb and wrapped him in his cloak, which was, according to custom, somewhat slit to allow of its being folded about him in the form of a cross. On his head he put a hood with an 8-cornered cross. The hood was left open, and the dead man's face was covered with black gauze. In his hands was put an icon of the Saviour. Towards morning he was put in the coffin which had been made ready long before. It was decided to leave the coffin all day in a cell, in the larger room in which the elder used to receive his visitors and fellow monks. As the deceased was a priest and monk of the strictest rule, the Gospel, not the Psalter, had to be read over his body by monks in holy orders. The reading was begun by Father Iosif immediately after the Requiem service. Father Piercy desired later on to read the Gospel all day and night over his dead friend, but for the present he, as well as the Father Superintendent of the Hermitage, was very busy and occupied, for something extraordinary and unheard of. Even unseemly excitement and impatient expectation began to be apparent in the monks, and the visitors from the monastery hostels, and the crowds of people flocking from the town. And as time went on, this grew more and more marked. Both the superintendent and Father Piercy did their utmost to calm the general bustle and agitation. When it was fully daylight, some people began bringing their sick, in most cases children, with them from the town, as though they had been waiting expressly for this moment to do so, evidently persuaded that the dead elder's remains had a power of healing, which would be immediately made manifest in accordance with their faith. It was only then apparent how unquestionably everyone in our town had accepted Father Zossima during his lifetime as a great saint, and those who came were far from being all of the humbler classes. This intense expectation on the part of believers displayed with such haste, such openness, even with impatience and almost insistence, impressed Father Piercy as unseemly. Though he had long foreseen something of the sort, the actual manifestation of the feeling was beyond anything he had looked for. When he came across any of the monks who displayed this excitement, Father Piercy began to reprove them. Such immediate expectation of something extraordinary, he said, shows a levity possible to worldly people but unseemly in us. But little attention was paid him, and Father Piercy noticed it uneasily. Yet he himself, secretly at the bottom of his heart, cherished almost the same hopes and could not but be aware of it, though he was indignant at the too impatient expectation around him, and saw in it light-mindedness and vanity. Nevertheless, it was particularly unpleasant to him to meet certain persons, whose presence aroused in him great misgivings. In the crowd in the dead man's cell, he noticed with inward aversion the presence of Rakitin and of the monk from Obdorsk, who was still staying in the monastery. Of both of them, Father Piercy felt for some reason suddenly suspicious, though indeed he might well have felt the same about others. The monk from Obdorsk was conspicuous as the most fussy in the excited crowd. He was to be seen everywhere. Everywhere he was asking questions, everywhere he was listening, on all sides he was whispering with a peculiar, mysterious air. His expression showed the greatest impatience and even a sort of irritation. As for Rakitin, he, as appeared later, had come so early to the Hermitage at the special request of Madame Holikov. As soon as that good-hearted but weak-minded woman, who could not herself have been admitted to the Hermitage, waked and heard of the death of Father Zossima, She was overtaken with such intense curiosity that she promptly dispatched Rakitin to the hermitage to keep a careful lookout and report to her by letter every half-hour or so everything that takes place. She regarded Rakitin as a most religious and devout young man. He was particularly clever in getting round people and assuming whatever part he thought most to their taste if he detected the slightest advantage to himself from doing so. It was a bright, clear day, and many of the visitors were thronging about the tombs, which were particularly numerous round the church and scattered here and there about the hermitage. As he walked around the hermitage, Father Percy remembered Alyosha and that he had not seen him for some time, not since the night, and he had no sooner thought of him than he had once noticed him in the farthest corner of the hermitage garden, sitting on the tombstone of a monk who had been famous long ago for his saintliness. He sat with his back to the hermitage and his face to the wall, and seemed to be hiding behind the tombstone. Going up to him, Father Percy saw that he was weeping quietly but bitterly, with his face hidden in his hands, and that his whole frame was shaking with sobs. Father Percy stood over him for a little. "Enough, dear son, enough, dear," he pronounced with feeling at last. "Why do you weep? Rejoice and weep not. Don't you know that this is the greatest of his days? Think only where he is now, at this moment." Alyosha glanced at him, uncovering his face, which was swollen with crying like a child's, but turned away at once without uttering a word and hid his face in his hands again. "Maybe it is well," said Father Percy thoughtfully. "Weep if you must. Christ has sent you those tears. Your touching tears are but a relief to your spirit and will serve to gladden your dear heart," he added to himself, walking away from Alyosha, and thinking lovingly of him. He moved away quickly, however, for he felt that he too might weep looking at him. Meanwhile, the time was passing. The monastery services and the requiems of the dead followed in their due course. Father Percy again took Father Iosif's place by the coffin and began reading the Gospel. But before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that something took place to which I alluded at the end of the last book, something so unexpectedly by all of us and so contrary to the general hope that, I repeat, this trivial incident has been minutely remembered to this day in our town and all the surrounding neighborhood. I may add here, for myself personally, that I feel it almost repulsive to recall that event which caused such frivolous agitation and was such a stumbling block to many, though in reality it was the most natural and trivial matter. I should, of course, have omitted all mention of it in my story, if it had not exerted a very strong influence on the heart and soul of the chief, though future hero of my story, Alyosha, forming a crisis and turning point in his spiritual development, giving a shock to his intellect, which finally strengthened it for the rest of his life and gave it a definite aim. And so, to return to our story. When before dawn they laid Father Zossima's body in the coffin and brought it into the front room, the question of opening the windows was raised among those who were round the coffin, but this suggestion made casually by someone was unanswered and almost unnoticed. Some of those present may perhaps have inwardly noticed it, only to reflect that the anticipation of decay and corruption from the body of such a saint was an actual absurdity, calling for compassion for the lack of faith and the frivolity it implied, for they expected something quite different. And behold, soon after midday there were signs of something, at first only observed in silence by those who came in and out, and were evidently each afraid to communicate the thought in his mind. But by 3 o'clock those signs had become so clear and unmistakable that the news swiftly reached all the monks and visitors in the hermitage, promptly penetrated to the monastery, throwing all the monks into amazement, and finally, in the shortest possible time, spread to the town, exciting everyone in it, believers and unbelievers alike. The unbelievers rejoiced, and as for the believers, some of them rejoiced even more than the unbelievers, for men love the downfall and disgrace of the righteous, as the deceased elder had said in one of his exhortations. The fact is that a smell of decomposition began to come from the coffin, growing gradually more marked, and by 3 o'clock it was quite unmistakable. In all the past history of our monastery, no such scandal could be recalled, and in no other circumstances could such a scandal have been possible, as showed itself in unseemly disorder immediately after this discovery among the very monks themselves. Afterwards, even many years afterwards, some sensible monks were amazed and horrified when they recalled that day. that the scandal could have reached such proportions. For in the past, monks of very holy life had died, God-fearing old men, whose saintliness was acknowledged by all. Yet from their humble coffins too, the breath of corruption had come, naturally, as from all dead bodies. But that had caused no scandal, nor even the slightest excitement. Of course, there had been, in former times, saints in a monastery whose memory was carefully preserved and whose relics, according to tradition, showed no signs of corruption. This fact was regarded by the monks as touching and mysterious, and the tradition of it was cherished as something blessed and miraculous, and as a promise, by God's grace, of still greater glory from their tombs in the future. One such, whose memory was particularly cherished, was an old monk, Job, who had died 70 years before at the age of 105. He had been a celebrated ascetic, rigid in fasting and silence, and his tomb was pointed out to all visitors on their arrival with peculiar respect and mysterious hints of great hopes connected with it. Another memory cherished in the monastery was that of the famous Father Zossima, who was only recently dead and had preceded Father Zossima in the eldership. He was referenced during his lifetime as a crazy saint by all the pilgrims to the monastery. There was a tradition that both of these had lain in their coffins as though alive, that they had shown no signs of decomposition when they were buried, and that there had been a holy light in their faces, and some people even insisted that a sweet fragrance came from their bodies. Yet, in spite of these edifying memories, it would be difficult to explain the frivolity, absurdity, and malice that were manifested beside the coffin of Father Zossima. It is my private opinion that several different causes were simultaneously at work, one of which was the deeply rooted hostility to the institution of elders as a pernicious innovation, and antipathy hidden deep in the hearts of many of the monks. Even more powerful was jealousy of the dead man's saintliness, so firmly established during his lifetime that it was almost a forbidden thing to question it. For though the late elder had won over many hearts, more by love than by miracles, and had gathered round him a mass of loving adherents, nonetheless, in fact, rather than more on that account he had awakened jealousy, and so had come to have bitter enemies, secret and open, not only in the monastery but in the world outside it. He did no one any harm, but why do they think him so saintly? And that question alone, gradually repeated, gave rise at last to an intense, insatiable hatred of him. That, I believe, was why many people were extremely delighted at the smell of decomposition which came so quickly. For not a day had passed since his death. At the same time, there were some among those who had been hitherto reverently devoted to the elder, who were almost mortified and personally affronted by this incident. This was how the thing happened. As soon as signs of decomposition had begun to appear, the whole aspect of the monks betrayed their secret motives in entering the cell. They went in, stayed a little while, and hastened out to confirm the news to the crowd of other monks waiting outside. Some of the latter shook their heads mournfully, but others did not even care to conceal the delight which gleamed unmistakably in their malignant eyes. And now no one reproached them for it, no one raised his voice in protest, which was strange, for the majority of the monks had been devoted to the dead elder. But it seemed as though God had in this case let the minority get the upper hand for a time. Visitors from outside, particularly of the educated class, soon went into the cell too, with the same spying intent. Of the peasantry, few went into the cell, though there were crowds of them at the gates of the hermitage. After 3 o'clock, the rush of worldly visitors was greatly increased, and this was no doubt owing to the shocking news. People were attracted who would not otherwise have come on that day and had not intended to come, and among them were some personages of high standing. But external decorum was still preserved, and Father Percy, with a stern face, continued firmly and distinctly reading aloud the Gospel, apparently not noticing what was taking place around him, though he had, in fact, observed something unusual long before. But at last the murmurs, first subdued but gradually louder and more confident, reached even him. It shows God's judgment is not as man's. Father Percy heard suddenly. The first to give utterance to this sentiment was a layman, an elderly official from the town, known to be a man of great piety. But he only repeated aloud what the monks had long been whispering. They had long before formulated this damning conclusion, And the worst of it was that a sort of triumphant satisfaction at that conclusion became more and more apparent every moment. Soon they began to lay aside even external decorum and almost seemed to feel they had a sort of right to discard it. And for what reason can this have happened? Some of the monks said, at first with a show of regret. He had a small frame, and his flesh was dried up on his bones. What was there to decay? It must be a sign from heaven, others hastened to add, and their opinion was adopted at once without protest. For it was pointed out, too, that if the decomposition had been natural, as in the case of every dead sinner, it would have been apparent later, after a lapse of at least 24 hours. But this premature corruption was in excess of nature, and so the finger of God was evident. It was meant for a sign. This conclusion seemed irresistible. Gentle Father Iosif, the librarian, a great favorite of the dead man's, tried to reply to some of the evil speakers that this is not held everywhere alike, and that the incorruptibility of the bodies of the just was not a dogma of the Orthodox Church, but only an opinion, and that even in the most orthodox regions, at Athos, for instance, they were not greatly confounded by the smell of corruption, and that the chief sign of the glorification of the saved was not bodily incorruptibility, but the color of the bones when the bodies have lain many years in the earth and have decayed in it. And if the bones are yellow as wax, that is the great sign that the Lord has glorified the dead saint. If they are not yellow but black, it shows that God has not deemed him worthy of such glory. That is the belief in Athos, a great place, where the orthodox doctrine has been preserved from of old, unbroken and in its greatest purity, said Father Iosif in conclusion. But the meek father's words had little effect and even provoked a mocking retort. That's all pedantry and innovation. No use listening to it, the monks decided. We stick to the old doctrine. There are all sorts of innovations nowadays. Are we to follow them all? Added others. We have had as many holy fathers as they had. There they are among the Turks. They have forgotten everything. Their doctrine has long been impure, and they have no bells even, the most sneering added. Father Iosif walked away, grieving the more since he had put forward his own opinion with little confidence, as though scarcely believing in it himself. He foresaw with distress that something very unseemly was beginning, and that there were positive signs of disobedience. Little by little, all the sensible monks were reduced to silence like Father Iosif. And so it came to pass that all who loved the elder and had accepted with devout obedience the institution of the eldership were all at once terribly cast down and glanced timidly in one another's faces when they met. Those who were hostile to the institution of elders as a novelty held up their heads proudly. There was no smell of corruption from the late elder Fasonofiev, but a sweet fragrance, they recalled malignantly. But he gained that glory not because he was an elder, but because he was a holy man. And this was followed by a shower of criticism and even blame of Father Zossima. His teaching was false. He taught that life is a great joy and not a vale of tears, said some of the more unreasonable. He followed the fashionable belief. He did not recognize material fire and hell. Others, still more unreasonable, added, he was not strict in fasting, allowed himself sweetenings, ate cherry jam with his tea. Ladies used to send it to him. Is it for a monk of strict rule to drink tea? Could be heard among some of the envious. He sat in pride, the most malignant declared vindictively. He considered himself a saint, and he took it as his due when people knelt before him. He abused the sacrament of confession. The fiercest opponents of the institution of elders added in a malicious whisper. And among these were some of the oldest monks, strictest in their devotion, genuine ascetics, who had kept silent during the life of the deceased elder, but now suddenly unsealed their lips. And this was terrible, for their words had great influence on young monks who were not yet firm in their convictions. The monk from Obdorsk heard all this attentively, heaving deep sighs and nodding his head. Yes, clearly Father Ferapont was right in his judgment yesterday. And at that moment Father Ferapont himself made his appearance, as though on purpose to increase the confusion. I have mentioned already that he rarely left his wooden cell by the apiary. He was seldom even seen at church, and they overlooked this neglect on the ground of his craziness, and did not keep him to the rules binding on all the rest. But if the whole truth is to be told, they hardly had a choice about it, for it would have been discreditable to insist on burdening with the common regulations so great an ascetic, who prayed day and night. If they had insisted, the monks would have said, "He is holier than all of us and he follows a rule harder than ours. And if he does not go to church, it's because he knows when he ought to. He has his own rule." It was to avoid the chance of these sinful murmurs that Father Ferapont was left in peace. As everyone was aware, Father Ferapont particularly disliked Father Zossima, and now the news had reached him in his hut that God's judgment is not the same as man's, and that something had happened which was in excess of nature. It may well be supposed that among the first to run to him with the news was the monk from Obdorsk, who had visited him the evening before and left his cell terror-stricken. I have mentioned above that though Father Percy, standing firm and immovable reading the gospel over the coffin, could not hear nor see what was passing outside the cell, he gauged most of it correctly in his heart, for he knew the men surrounding him well. He was not shaken by it, but awaited what would come next without fear, watching with penetration and insight for the outcome of the general excitement. Suddenly an extraordinary uproar in the passage in open defiance of decorum burst on his ears. The door was flung open and Father Ferapont appeared in the doorway. Behind him there could be seen accompanying him a crowd of monks, together with many people from the town. They did not, however, enter the cell, but stood at the bottom of the steps, waiting to see what Father Ferapont would say or do, for they felt with a certain awe, in spite of their audacity, that he had not come for nothing. Standing in the doorway, Father Ferapont raised his arms, and under his right arm the keen, inquisitive little eyes of the monk from Obdorsk peeped in. He alone, in his intense curiosity, could not resist running up the steps after Father Ferapont. The others, on the contrary, pressed farther back in sudden alarm when the door was noisily flung open. Holding his hands aloft, Father Ferapont suddenly roared, "Casting out, I cast out!" And, turning in all directions, he began at once making the sign of the cross at each of the 4 walls and 4 corners of the cell in succession. All who accompanied Father Ferapont immediately understood his action, for they knew he always did this wherever he went, and that he would not sit down or say a word till he had driven out the evil spirits. "Satan, go hence! Satan, go hence!" He repeated at each sign of the cross. "Casting out, I cast out," he roared again. He was wearing his coarse gown girt with a rope. His bare chest, covered with grey hair, could be seen under his hempen shirt. His feet were bare. As soon as he began waving his arms, the cruel irons he wore under his gown could be heard clanking. Father Percy paused in his reading, stepped forward, and stood before him waiting. "What have you come for, worthy father? Why do you offend against good order? Why do you disturb the peace of the flock?" he said at last, looking sternly at him. "What have I come for? You ask why? What is your faith?" shouted Father Ferapont crazily. "I've come here to drive out your fistes, the unclean devils. I've come to see how many have gathered here while I have been away. I want to sweep them out with a birch broom." "You cast out the evil spirit, but perhaps you are serving him yourself," Father Percy went on fearlessly. "And who can say of himself, 'I am holy'? Can you, Father?" "I am unclean, not holy. I would not sit in an armchair and would not have them bow down to me as an idol," thundered Father Ferapont. "Nowadays folk destroy the true faith. The dead man, your saint," he turned to the crowd, pointing with his finger to the coffin, "did not believe in devils. He gave medicine to keep off the devils. And so they have become as common as spiders in the corners. And now he has begun to stink himself. In that we see a great sign from God." The instant he referred to was this. One of the monks was haunted in his dreams and, later on, in waking moments, by visions of evil spirits. When in the utmost terror he confided this to Father Zossima, the elder had advised continual prayer and rigid fasting. But when that was of no use, he advised him, while persisting in prayer and fasting, to take a special medicine. Many persons were shocked at the time and wagged their heads as they talked over it, and most of all Father Ferapont, to whom some of the censoriers had hastened to report this extraordinary counsel on the part of the elder. "Go away, Father," said Father Percy, in a commanding voice. "It's not for man to judge, but for God. Perhaps we see here a sign which neither you, nor I, nor any one of us is able to comprehend. Go, Father, and do not trouble the flock," he repeated impressively. He did not keep the fasts according to the rule, and therefore the sign has come. That is clear, and it's a sin to hide it. The fanatic, carried away by a zeal that outstripped his reason, would not be quieted. He was seduced by sweetmeats. Ladies brought them to him in their pockets. He sipped tea. He worshipped his belly, filling it with sweet things and his mind with haughty thoughts. And for this he is put to shame. You speak lightly, Father. Father Piercy, too, raised his voice. I admire your fasting and severities, but you speak lightly like some frivolous youth, fickle and childish. Go away, Father. I command you. Father Piercy thundered in conclusion. I will go, said Ferapont, seeming somewhat taken aback, but still as bitter. You learned men. You are so clever you look down upon my humbleness. I came hither with little learning, and here I have forgotten what I did know. God himself has preserved me in my weakness from your subtlety. Father Piercy stood over him, waiting resolutely. Father Ferapont paused, and suddenly leaning his cheek on his hand despondently, pronounced in a sing-song voice, looking at the coffin of the dead elder. Tomorrow they will sing over him, our helper and defender, a splendid anthem, and over me when I die all they'll sing will be what earthly joy, a little canticle. He added with tearful regret, You are proud and puffed up. This is a vain place. He shouted suddenly like a madman, and with a wave of his hand he turned quickly and quickly descended the steps. The crowd awaiting him below wavered. Some followed him at once, and some lingered, for the cell was still open, and Father Piercy, following Father Ferapont onto the steps, stood watching him. But the excited old fanatic was not completely silenced. Walking 20 steps away, he suddenly turned towards the setting sun, raised both his arms, and, as though someone had cut him down, fell to the ground with a loud scream. My God has conquered! Christ has conquered the setting sun! He shouted fanatically, stretching up his hands to the sun, and falling face downwards on the ground, he sobbed like a little child, shaken by his tears, and spread out his arms on the ground. Then all rushed up to him. There were exclamations and sympathetic sobs. A kind of frenzy seemed to take possession of them all. This is the one who is a saint. This is the one who is a holy man, some cried aloud, losing their fear. This is he who should be an elder, others added malignantly. He won't be an elder. He would refuse. He won't serve a cursed innovation. He wouldn't imitate their foolery, other voices chimed in at once. And it is hard to say how far they might have gone, but at that moment the bell rang summoning them to service. All began crossing themselves at once. Father Ferapont, too, got up and crossing himself went back to his cell without looking round, still uttering exclamations which were utterly incoherent. A few followed him, but the greater number dispersed, hastening to service. Father Piercy let Father Iosif read in his place and went down. The frantic outcries of bigots could not shake him, but his heart was suddenly filled with melancholy for some special reason, and he felt that. He stood still and suddenly wondered, why am I sad even to dejection? And immediately grasped with surprise that his sudden sadness was due to a very small and special cause. In a crowd thronging at the entrance to the cell, he had noticed Alyosha, and he remembered that he had felt at once a pang at heart on seeing him. Can that boy mean so much to my heart now? He asked himself, wondering. At that moment Alyosha passed him, hurrying away, but not in the direction of the church. Their eyes met. Alyosha quickly turned away his eyes and dropped them to the ground, and from the boy's look alone, Father Piercy guessed what a great change was taking place in him at that moment. Have you too fallen into temptation? Cried Father Piercy. Can you be with those of little faith? He added mournfully. Alyosha stood still and gazed vaguely at Father Piercy, but quickly turned his eyes away again and again looked on the ground. He stood sideways and did not turn his face to Father Piercy, who watched him attentively. Where are you hastening? The bell calls to service, he asked again, but again Alyosha gave no answer. Are you leaving the hermitage? What? Without asking leave, without asking a blessing? Alyosha suddenly gave a wry smile, cast a strange, very strange look at the father to whom his former guide, the former sovereign of his heart and mind, his beloved elder, had confided him as he lay dying, and suddenly, still without speaking, waved his hand, as though not caring even to be respectful, and with rapid steps walked towards the gates away from the hermitage. You will come back again, murmured Father Piercy, looking after him with sorrowful surprise. Chapter 2. A critical moment. Father Pesci, of course, was not wrong when he decided that his dear boy would come back again. Perhaps indeed, to some extent, he penetrated with insight into the true meaning of Alyosha's spiritual condition. Yet I must frankly own that it would be very difficult for me to give a clear account of that strange, vague moment in the life of the young hero I love so much. To Father Pesci's sorrowful question, "Are you too with those of little faith?" I could of course confidently answer for Alyosha. No, he is not with those of little faith, quite the contrary. Indeed, all his trouble came from the fact that he was of great faith. But still the trouble was there and was so agonizing that even long afterwards Alyosha thought of that sorrowful day as one of the bitterest and most fatal days of his life. If the question is asked, could all his grief and disturbance have been only due to the fact that his eldest body had shown signs of premature decomposition instead of at once performing miracles? I must answer without beating about the bush. Yes, it certainly was. I would only beg the reader not to be in too great a hurry to laugh at my young hero's pure heart. I am far from intending to apologize for him or to justify his innocent faith on the ground of his youth, or the little progress he had made in his studies, or any such reason. I must declare, on the contrary, that I have genuine respect for the qualities of his heart. No doubt a youth who received impressions cautiously, whose love was lukewarm, and whose mind was too prudent for his age and so of little value. Such a young man's might, I admit, have avoided what happened to my hero. But in some cases it is really more creditable to be carried away by an emotion, however unreasonable, which springs from a great love, than to be unmoved. And it is even truer in youth, for a young man who is always sensible is to be suspected and is of little worth. That's my opinion. But reasonable people will exclaim, perhaps, every young man cannot believe in such a superstition, and your hero is no model for others. To this I reply again, yes, my hero had faith, a faith holy and steadfast, but still I am not going to apologize for him. Though I declared above, and perhaps too hastily, that I should not explain or justify my hero, I see that some explanation is necessary for the understanding of the rest of my story. Let me say then, it was not a question of miracles. There was no frivolous and impatient expectation of miracles in his mind. And Alyosha needed no miracles at the time, for the triumph of some preconceived idea. Oh no, not at all. What he saw before all was one figure, the figure of his beloved elder, the figure of that holy man whom he revered with such adoration. The fact is that all the love that lay concealed in his pure young heart for everyone and everything had, for the past year, been concentrated, and perhaps wrongly so, on one being, his beloved elder. It is true that being had for so long been accepted by him as his ideal, that all his young strength and energy could not but turn towards that ideal, even to the forgetting at the moment of everyone and everything. He remembered afterwards how, on that terrible day, he had entirely forgotten his brother Dmitri, about whom he had been so anxious and troubled the day before. He had forgotten, too, to take the 200 rubles to Alyosha's father, though he had so warmly intended to do so the preceding evening. But again, it was not miracles he needed, but only the higher justice, which had been in his belief outraged by the blow that had so suddenly and cruelly wounded his heart. And what does it signify that this justice, looked for by Alyosha, inevitably took the shape of miracles to be wrought immediately by the ashes of his adored teacher? Why, everyone in the monastery cherished the same thought and the same hope, even those whose intellects Alyosha revered, Father Pesci himself, for instance, and so Alyosha, untroubled by doubts, clothed his dreams too in the same form as all the rest. And a whole year of life in the monastery had formed the habit of this expectation in his heart. But it was justice he thirsted for, not simply miracles. And now the man who should, he believed, have been exalted above everyone in the whole world, that man, instead of receiving the glory that was his due, was suddenly degraded and dishonored. What for? Who had judged him? Who could have decreed this? Those were the questions that wrung his inexperienced and virginal heart. He could not endure without mortification, without resentment even, that the holiest of holy men should have been exposed to the jeering and spiteful mockery of the frivolous crowd so inferior to him. Even had there been no miracles, had there been nothing marvelous to justify his hopes, why this indignity? Why this humiliation? Why this premature decay in excess of nature, as the spiteful monks said? Why this sign from heaven, which they so triumphantly acclaimed in company with Father Ferapont? And why did they believe they had gained the right to acclaim it? Where is the finger of Providence? Why did Providence hide its face at the most critical moment, as though voluntarily submitting to the blind, dumb, pitiless laws of nature? That was why Alyosha's heart was bleeding. And, of course, as I have said already, the sting of it all was that the man he loved above everything on earth should be put to shame and humiliated. This murmuring may have been shallow and unreasonable in my hero, but I repeat again for the third time, and am prepared to admit that it might be difficult to defend my feeling. I am glad that my hero showed himself not too reasonable at that moment, for any man of sense will always come back to reason in time. But if love does not gain the upper hand in the boy's heart at such an exceptional moment, when will it? I will not, however, omit to mention something strange, which came for a time to the surface of Alyosha's mind at this fatal and obscure moment. This new something was the harassing impression left by the conversation with Ivan, which now persistently haunted Alyosha's mind. At this moment it haunted him. Oh, it was not that something of the fundamental, elemental, so to speak. Faith of his soul had been shaken. He loved his God and believed in him steadfastly, though he was suddenly murmuring against him. Yet a vague but tormenting and evil impression left by his conversation with Ivan the day before suddenly revived again now in his soul and seemed forcing its way to the surface of his consciousness. It had begun to get dusk when Rakitin, crossing the pine copse from the hermitage to the monastery, suddenly noticed Alyosha lying face downwards on the ground under a tree, not moving and apparently asleep. He went up and called him by his name. "You here, Alexei? Can you have—" He began wondering but broke off. He had meant to say, "Can you have come to this?" Alyosha did not look at him, but from a slight movement Rakitin at once saw that he heard and understood him. "What's the matter?" he went on, but the surprise in his face gradually passed into a smile that became more and more ironical. "I say, I've been looking for you for the last 2 hours. You suddenly disappeared. What are you about? What foolery is this? You might just look at me." Alyosha raised his head, sat up and leaned his back against the tree. He was not crying, but there was a look of suffering and irritability in his face. He did not look at Rakitin, however, but looked away to one side of him. "Do you know your face has quite changed? There's none of your famous mildness to be seen in it. Are you angry with someone? Have they been ill-treating you?" "Let me alone," said Alyosha suddenly, with a weary gesture of his hand, still looking away from him. "Oh, so that's how we're feeling. So you can shout at people like other mortals. That is a come down from the angels. I say, Alyosha, you have surprised me. Do you hear? I mean it. It's long since I've been surprised at anything here. I always took you for an educated man." Alyosha at last looked at him, but vaguely, as though scarcely understanding what he said. "Can you really be so upset simply because your old man has begun to stink? You don't mean to say you seriously believe that he was going to work miracles?" exclaimed Rakitin, genuinely surprised again. I believe. I want to believe, and I will believe. What more do you want?" cried Alyosha irritably. "Nothing at all, my boy. Damn it all. Why, no schoolboy of 13 believes in that now. But there, so now you are in a temper with your God. You are rebelling against him. He hasn't given promotion. He hasn't bestowed the Order of Merit. You're a set." Alyosha gazed a long while with his eyes half closed at Rakitin, and there was a sudden gleam in his eyes, but not of anger with Rakitin. "I am not rebelling against my God. I simply don't accept his world." Alyosha suddenly smiled a forced smile. "How do you mean you don't accept the world?" Rakitin thought a moment over his answer. "What idiocy is this?" Alyosha did not answer. "Come, enough nonsense. Now to business. Have you had anything to eat today?" "I don't remember. I think I have." "You need keeping up, to judge by your face. It makes one sorry to look at you. You didn't sleep all night either, I hear. You had a meeting in there, and then all this bobbery afterwards. Most likely you've had nothing to eat but a mouthful of holy bread. I've got some sausage in my pocket. I brought it from the town in case of need. Only you won't eat sausage." "Give me some." "I say, you are going it. Why, It's a regular mutiny, with barricades. Well, my boy, we must make the most of it. Come to my place. I shouldn't mind a drop of vodka myself. I'm tired to death. Vodka is going too far for you, I suppose. Or would you like some? Give me some vodka, too. Hello! You surprised me, brother. Rakitin looked at him in amazement. Well, one way or another, vodka or sausage. This is a jolly fine chance and mustn't be missed. Come along. Alyosha got up in silence and followed Rakitin. If your little brother Ivan could see this, wouldn't he be surprised? By the way, your brother Ivan set off to Moscow this morning. Did you know? Yes, answered Alyosha listlessly, and suddenly the image of his brother Dmitri rose before his mind, but only for a minute, and though it reminded him of something that must not be put off for a moment, some duty, some terrible obligation, even that reminder made no impression on him, did not reach his heart and instantly faded out of his mind and was forgotten. But a long while afterwards, Alyosha remembered this. Your brother Ivan declared once that I was a liberal booby with no talents whatsoever. Once you, too, could not resist letting me know I was dishonorable. Well, I should like to see what your talents and sense of honor will do for you now. This phrase Rakitin finished to himself in a whisper. Listen, he said aloud. Let's go by the path beyond the monastery straight to the town. I ought to go to Madame Holokov's, by the way. Only fancy. I've written to tell her everything that happened, and would you believe it? She answered me instantly in pencil that she would never have expected such conduct from a man of such a reverend character as Father Zossima. That was her very word. Conduct. She's very angry, too. You're a set. Stay, he cried suddenly again. He suddenly stopped and taking Alyosha by the shoulder made him stop too. Do you know, Alyosha? He peeped inquisitively into his eyes, absorbed in his sudden new thoughts which had dawned on him, and though he was laughing outwardly, he was evidently afraid to utter that new idea aloud. So difficult he still found it to believe in the strange and unexpected mood in which he now saw Alyosha. Alyosha, do you know where we had better go? He brought out at last timidly and insinuatingly. I don't care. Where you like. Let's go to Grushenka, eh? Will you come? Pronounced Rakitin at last, trembling with timid suspense. Let's go to Grushenka, Alyosha answered calmly. At once, and this prompt and calm agreement was such a surprise to Rakitin that he almost started back. Well, I say, he cried in amazement, but seizing Alyosha firmly by the arm, he led him along the path, still dreading that he would change his mind. They walked along in silence. Rakitin was positively afraid to talk. And how glad she will be, how delighted, he muttered, but lapsed into silence again. And indeed it was not to please Grushenka he was taking Alyosha to her. He was a practical person and never undertook anything without a prospect of gain for himself. His object in this case was twofold. First, a revengeful desire to see the downfall of the righteous, and Alyosha's fall from the saints to the sinners, over which he was already gloating in his imagination. And in the second place, he had in view a certain material gain for himself, of which more will be said later. So the critical moment has come, he thought to himself with spiteful glee, and we shall catch it on the hop, for it's just what we want. Chapter 3. An Onion. Grushenka lived in the busiest part of the town, near the cathedral square, in a small wooden lodge in the courtyard belonging to the house of the widow Morozov. The house was a large stone building of 2 stories, old and very ugly. The widow led a secluded life with her 2 unmarried nieces, who were also elderly women. She had no need to let her lodge, but everyone knew that she had taken in Grushenka as a lodger 4 years before, solely to please her kinsman, the merchant Samsonov, who was known to be the girl's protector. It was said that the jealous old man's object in placing his favorite with the widow Morozov was that the old woman would keep a sharp eye on her new lodger's conduct. But this sharp eye soon proved to be unnecessary, and in the end the widow Morozov seldom met Grushenka and did not worry her by looking after her in any way. It is true that 4 years had passed since the old man had brought the slim, delicate, shy, timid, dreamy, and sad girl of 18 from the chief town of the province, and much had happened since then. Little was known of the girl's history in the town, and that little was vague. Nothing more had been learnt during the last 4 years. even after many persons had become interested in the beautiful young woman into whom Agravena Alexandrovna had meanwhile developed. There were rumors that she had been at 17 betrayed by someone, some sort of officer, and immediately afterwards abandoned by him. The officer had gone away and afterwards married, while Grushenka had been left in poverty and disgrace. It was said, however, that though Grushenka had been raised from destitution by the old man, Samsonov, she came of a respectable family belonging to the clerical class, that she was the daughter of a deacon or something of the sort. And now, after 4 years, this sensitive, injured, and pathetic little orphan had become a plump, rosy beauty of the Russian type, a woman of bold and determined character, proud and insolent. She had a good head for business, was acquisitive, saving and careful, and by fair means or foul had succeeded, it was said, in amassing a little fortune. There was only one point on which all were agreed. Grushenka was not easily to be approached, and except her aged protector, there had not been one man who could boast of her favors during those 4 years. It was a positive fact, for there had been a good many, especially during the last 2 years, who had attempted to obtain those favors. But all their efforts had been in vain, and some of these suitors had been forced to beat an undignified and even comic retreat, owing to the firm and ironical resistance they met from the strong-willed young person. It was known, too, that the young person had, especially of late, been given to what is called speculation, and that she had shown marked abilities in that direction, so that many people began to say that she was no better than a Jew. It was not that she lent money on interest, but it was known, for instance, that she had some time past, in partnership with old Karamazov, actually invested in the purchase of bad debts for a trifle, a tenth of their nominal value, and afterwards had made out of them 10 times their value. The old widower Samsonov, a man of large fortune, was stingy and merciless. He tyrannized over his grown-up sons, but for the last year during which he had been ill and lost the use of his swollen legs, he had fallen greatly under the influence of his protege, whom he had at first kept strictly and in humble surroundings on Lenten fare, as the wit said at the time. But Grushenka had succeeded in emancipating herself, while she established in him a boundless belief in her fidelity. The old man, now long since dead, had had a large business in his day and was also a noteworthy character, miserly and hard as flint. Though Grushenka's hold upon him was so strong that he could not live without her, he did not settle any considerable fortune on her and would not have been moved to do so, if she had threatened to leave him. But he had presented her with a small sum, and even that was a surprise to everyone when it became known. "You are a wench with brains," he said to her, when he gave her 8,000 rubles, "and you must look after yourself. But let me tell you that except your yearly allowance as before, you get nothing more from me to the day of my death, and I'll leave you nothing in my will either." And he kept his word. He died and left everything to his sons, whom, with their wives and children, he had treated all his life as servants. Grushenka was not even mentioned in his will. All this became known afterwards. He helped Grushenka with his advice to increase her capital and put business in her way. When Fyodor Pavlovich, who first came into contact with Grushenka over a piece of speculation, ended to his own surprise by falling madly in love with her, old Samsonov, gravely ill as he was immensely amused. It is remarkable that throughout their whole acquaintance, Grushenka was absolutely and spontaneously open with the old man, and he seems to have been the only person in the world with whom she was so. Of late, when Dmitri too had come on the scene with his love, the old man left off laughing. On the contrary, he once gave Grushenka a stern and earnest piece of advice. "If you have to choose between the two, father or son, you'd better choose the old man. If only you make sure the old scoundrel will marry you and settle some fortune on your forehead. But don't keep on with the captain. You'll get no good out of that." These were the very words of the old profligate, who felt already that his death was not far off and who actually died 5 months later. I will note, too, in passing, that although many in our town knew of the grotesque and monstrous rivalry of the Karamazovs, father and son, the object of which was Grushenka, scarcely anyone understood what really underlay her attitude to both of them. Even Grushenka's 2 servants testified in court that she received Dmitri Fyodorovich simply from fear because he threatened to murder her. These servants were an old cook, invalidish and almost deaf, who came from Grushenka's old home, and her granddaughter, a smart young girl of 20, who performed the duties of a maid. Grushenka lived very economically, and her surroundings were anything but luxurious. Her lodge consisted of 3 rooms furnished with mahogany furniture in the fashion of 1820, belonging to her landlady. It was quite dark when Rakitin and Alyosha entered her rooms, yet they were not lighted up. Grushenka was lying down in her drawing room on the big, hard, clumsy sofa with a mahogany back. The sofa was covered with shabby and ragged leather. Under her head she had 2 white down pillows taken from her bed. She was lying stretched out, motionless on her back with her hands behind her head. She was dressed as though expecting someone, in a black silk dress with a dainty lace fichu on her head, which was very becoming. Over her shoulders was thrown a lace shawl pinned with a massive gold brooch. She certainly was expecting someone. She lay as though impatient and weary, her face rather pale and her lips and eyes hot, restlessly tapping the arm of the sofa with the tip of her right foot. The appearance of Rakitin and Alyosha caused a slight excitement. From the hall they could hear Grushenka leap up from the sofa and cry out in a frightened voice, "Who is there?" But the maid met the visitors and at once called back to her mistress. "It's not he, it's nothing, only other visitors." "What can be the matter?" muttered Rakitin, leading Alyosha into the drawing room. Grushenka was standing by the sofa as though still alarmed. A thick coil of her dark brown hair escaped from its lace covering and fell on her right shoulder, but she did not notice it and did not put it back till she had gazed her visitors and recognized them. "Ah, it's you, Rakitin. You quite frightened me. Whom have you brought? Who is this with you?" "Good heavens, you have brought him," she exclaimed, recognizing Alyosha. "Do send for candles," said Rakitin, with the free and easy air of a most intimate friend, who is privileged to give orders in the house. "Candles, of course, candles. Fenya, fetch him a candle." "Well, you have chosen the moment to bring him," she exclaimed again, nodding towards Alyosha, and turning to the looking-glass she began quickly fastening up her hair with both hands. She seemed displeased. "Haven't I managed to please you?" asked Rakitin, instantly almost offended. "You frightened me, Rakitin. That's what it is." Grushenka turned with a smile to Alyosha. "Don't be afraid of me, my dear Alyosha. You cannot think how glad I am to see you, my unexpected visitor. But you frightened me, Rakitin. I thought it was Mitya breaking in. You see, I deceived him just now. I made him promise to believe me, and I told him a lie. I told him that I was going to spend the evening with my old man, Kuzma Kuzmich, and should be there till late counting up his money. I always spend one whole evening a week with him, making up his accounts. We lock ourselves in, and he counts on the reckoning beads while I sit and put things down in the book. I am the only person he trusts. Mitya believes that I am there, but I came back and have been sitting locked in here, expecting some news. How was it Venya let you in? Venya, run out to the gate, open it, and look about whether the captain is to be seen. Perhaps he's hiding and spying. I'm dreadfully frightened." "There is no one there, Agrafena Alexandrovna. I've just looked out. I keep running to peep through the crack. I am in fear and trembling myself." "Are the shutters fastened, Venya? And we must draw the curtains." "That's better." She drew the heavy curtains herself. He'd rush in at once if he saw a light. "I'm afraid of your brother Mitya today, Alyosha." Grushenka spoke aloud, and though she was alarmed, she seemed very happy about something. "Why are you so afraid of Mitya today?" inquired Rakitin. "I should have thought you were not timid with him. You twist him round your little finger." "I tell you, I'm expecting news, priceless news, so I don't want Mitya at all. And he didn't believe, I feel he didn't, that I should stay at Kuzma Kuzmich's. He must be in his ambush now, behind Fyodor Pavlovich's, in the garden, watching for me. And if he's there, he won't come here. So much the better. But I really have been to Kuzma Kuzmich's. Mitya escorted me there. I told him I should stay there till midnight, and I asked him to be sure to come at midnight to fetch me home. He went away, and I sat 10 minutes with Kuzma Kuzmich and came back here again. I was afraid. I ran for fear of meeting him." "And why are you so dressed up? What a curious cap you've got on." "How curious you are yourself, Rakitin. I tell you, I'm expecting a message. If the message comes, I shall fly. I shall gallop away, and you will see no more of me. That's why I'm dressed up, so as to be ready." And where are you flying to? If you know too much, you'll get old too soon. Upon my word, you are highly delighted. I've never seen you like this before. You are dressed up as if you were going to a ball. Rakitin looked her up and down. Much you know about balls. And do you know much about them? I have seen a ball. The year before last, Kuzma Kuzmich's son was married and I looked on from the gallery. Do you suppose I want to be talking to you, Rakitin, while a prince like this is standing here? Such a vista. Alyosha, my dear boy, I gaze at you and can't believe my eyes. Good heavens, can you have come here to see me? To tell you the truth, I never had a thought of seeing you and I didn't think that you would ever come and see me. Though this is not the moment now, I'm awfully glad to see you. Sit down on the sofa here. That's right, my bright young moon. I really can't take it in even now. Rakitin, if only you had brought him yesterday or the day before. But I'm glad as it is. Perhaps it's better he has come now, at such a moment, and not the day before yesterday. She gaily sat down beside Alyosha on the sofa, looking at him with positive delight, and she really was glad. She was not lying when she said so. Her eyes glowed, her lips laughed, but it was a good-hearted and merry laugh. Alyosha had not expected to see such a kind expression in her face. He had hardly met her till the day before. He had formed an alarming idea of her, and had been horribly distressed the day before by the spiteful and treacherous trick she had played on Katerina Ivanovna. He was greatly surprised to find her now altogether different from what he had expected, and, crushed as he was by his own sorrow, his eyes involuntarily rested on her with attention. Her whole manner seemed changed for the better since yesterday. There was scarcely any trace of that mawkish sweetness in her speech, of that voluptuous softness in her movements. Everything was simple and good-natured. Her gestures were rapid, direct, confiding, but she was greatly excited. Dear me, how everything comes together today, she chatted on again, and why I'm so glad to see you, Alyosha. I couldn't say myself. If you asked me, I couldn't tell you. Come, don't you know why you're glad? Said Rakitin, grinning. You used to be always pestering me to bring him. You'd some object, I suppose. I had a different object once, but now it's over. This is not the moment. I say, I want you to have something nice. I am so good-natured now. You sit down too, Rakitin. Why are you standing? You sit down already. There's no fear of Rakitin's forgetting to look after himself. Look, Alyosha, he's sitting there opposite us, so offended that I didn't ask him to sit down before you. Rakitin is such a one to take offense, laughed Grushenka. Don't be angry, Rakitin. I'm kind today. Why are you so depressed, Alyosha? Are you afraid of me? She peeped into his eyes with merry mockery. He's sad. The promotion has not been given, boomed Rakitin. What promotion? His elder stings. What? You are talking some nonsense. You want to say something nasty. Be quiet, you stupid. Let me sit on your knee, Alyosha, like this. She suddenly skipped forward and jumped, laughing, on his knee, like a nestling kitten, with her right arm about his neck. I'll cheer you up, my pious boy. Yes, really. Will you let me sit on your knee? You won't be angry? If you tell me, I'll get off. Alyosha did not speak. He sat afraid to move. He heard her words. If you tell me, I'll get off. But he did not answer. But there was nothing in his heart such as Rakitin, for instance, watching him malignantly from his corner, might have expected or fancied. The great grieve in his heart swallowed up every sensation that might have been aroused, and if only he could have thought clearly at that moment, he would have realized that he had now the strongest armor to protect him from every lust and temptation. Yet in spite of the fake irresponsiveness of his spiritual condition and the sorrow that overwhelmed him, he could not help wondering at a new and strange sensation in his heart. This woman, this dreadful woman, had no terror for him now, none of that terror that had stirred in his soul at any passing thought of woman. On the contrary, this woman, dreaded above all women, sitting now on his knee, holding him in her arms, aroused in him now a quite different, unexpected, peculiar feeling. A feeling of the intensest and purest interest without a trace of fear, of his former terror. That was what instinctively surprised him. You've talked nonsense enough, cried Rakitin. You'd much better give us some champagne. You owe it to me. You know you do. Yes, I really do. Do you know, Alyosha, I promised him champagne on the top of everything, if he'd bring you. I'll have some too. Fenya, bring us the bottle Mitya left. Look sharp. Though I'm so stingy, I'll stand a bottle. Not for you, Rakitin. You're a toadstool, but he's a falcon. And though my heart is full of something very different, so be it. I'll drink with you. I long for some dissipation. But what is the matter with you? And what is this message, may I ask? Or is it a secret? Rakitin put in inquisitively. doing his best to pretend not to notice the snubs that were being continually aimed at him. It's not a secret, and you know it too, Grushenka said, in a voice suddenly anxious, turning her head towards Rakitin and drawing a little away from Alyosha, though she still sat on his knee with her arm round his neck. My officer is coming, Rakitin. My officer is coming. I heard he was coming, but is he so near? He is at Mokroe now. He'll send a messenger from there. So he wrote. I got a letter for him today. I'm expecting the messenger every minute. You don't say so. Why at Mokroe? That's a long story. I've told you enough. Mitya will be up to something now, I'd say. Does he know or doesn't he? He know? Of course he doesn't. If he knew, there would be murder. But I'm not afraid of that now. I'm not afraid of his knife. Be quiet, Rakitin. Don't remind me of Dmitri Fyodorovich. He has bruised my heart, and I don't want to think of that at this moment. I can think of Alyosha here. I can look at Alyosha. Smile at me, dear, cheer up. Smile at my foolishness, at my pleasure. Ah, he's smiling. How kindly he looks at me. And you know, Alyosha, I've been thinking all this time you were angry with me because of the day before yesterday, because of that young lady. I was a cur, that's the truth. But it's a good thing it happened so. It was a horrid thing, but a good thing too. Grushenka smiled dreamily, and a little cruel line showed in her smile. Mitya told me that she screamed out that I ought to be flogged. I did insult her dreadfully. She sent for me. She wanted to make a conquest of me, to win me over with a chocolate. Now, it's a good thing it did end like that. She smiled again. But I'm still afraid of your being angry. Yes, that's really true, Rakitin put in suddenly with genuine surprise. Alyosha, she's really afraid of a chicken like you. He is a chicken to you, Rakitin, because you've no conscience. That's what it is. You see, I love him with all my soul. That's how it is. Alyosha, do you believe I love you with all my soul? Ah, you shameless woman. She's making you a declaration, Alexei. Well, what of it? I love him. And what about your officer and the priceless message from Mokroe? That is quite different. That's a woman's way of looking at it. Don't you make me angry, Rakitin. Grushenka caught him up hotly. This is quite different. I love Alyosha in a different way. It's true, Alyosha, I had sly designs on you before, for I am a horrid, violent creature. But at other times I've looked upon you, Alyosha, as my conscience. I've kept thinking how anyone like that must despise a nasty thing like me. I thought that the day before yesterday, as I ran home from the young ladies. I've thought of you a long time in that way, Alyosha, and Mitya knows. I've talked to him about it. Mitya understands. Would you believe it? I sometimes look at you and feel ashamed, utterly ashamed of myself. And how, and since when, I began to think about you like that, I can't say. I don't remember. Venya came in and put a tray with an uncorked bottle and 3 glasses of champagne on the table. Here's the champagne, cried Rakitin. You're excited, Agrafena Alexandrovna, and not yourself. When you've had a glass of champagne, you'll be ready to dance. They can't even do that properly, he added, looking at the bottle. The old woman's poured it out in the kitchen, and the bottle's been brought in warm and without a cork. Well, let me have some anyway. He went up to the table, took a glass, emptied it at one gulp, and poured himself out another. One doesn't often stumble upon champagne, he said, licking his lips. Now, Alyosha, take a glass. Show what you can do. What shall we drink to? The gates of paradise? Take a glass, Grushenka. You drink to the gates of paradise too. What gates of paradise? She took a glass. Alyosha took his, tasted it, and put it back. No, I'd better not. He smiled gently. And you bragged, cried Rakitin. Well, if so, I won't either, chimed in Grushenka. I really don't want any. You can drink the whole bottle alone, Rakitin. If Alyosha has some, I will. What touching sentimentality, said Rakitin tauntingly. And she's sitting on his knee too. He's got something to grieve over, but what's the matter with you? He's rebelling against his God and ready to eat sausage. How so? His elder died today, Father Zossima, the saint. So Father Zossima is dead, cried Grushenka. Good God, I did not know. She crossed herself devoutly. Goodness, what have I been doing, sitting on his knee like this at such a moment? She started up as though in dismay, instantly slipped off his knee and sat down on the sofa. Alyosha bent a long wondering look upon her, and a light seemed to dawn in his face. Rakitin, he said suddenly, in a firm and loud voice, don't taunt me with having rebelled against God. I don't want to feel angry with you, so you must be kinder too. I've lost a treasure such as you have never had, and you cannot judge me now. You had much better look at her. Do you see how she was pity on me? I came here to find a wicked soul. I felt drawn to evil because I was base and evil myself, and I found a true sister. I have found a treasure, a loving heart. She had pity on me just now, Agrafena Alexandrovna. I'm speaking of you. You've raised my soul from the depths." Alyosha's lips were quivering and he caught his breath. "She has saved you, it seems," laughed Rakitin spitefully, "and she meant to get you in her clutches. Do you realize that?" "Stay, Rakitin," Grushenka jumped up. "Hush, both of you. Now I'll tell you all about it. Hush, Alyosha. Your words make me ashamed, for I am bad and not good. That's what I am. And you hush, Rakitin, because you are telling lies. I had the low idea of trying to get him in my clutches, but now you are lying. Now it's all different. And don't let me hear anything more from you, Rakitin." All this Grushenka said with extreme emotion. "They are both crazy," said Rakitin, looking at them with amazement. "I feel as though I were in a madhouse. They're both getting so feeble they'll begin crying in a minute." "I shall begin to cry, I shall," repeated Grushenka. "He called me his sister, and I shall never forget that. Only let me tell you, Rakitin, though I'm bad, I did give away an onion." "An onion? Hang it all, you really are crazy." Rakitin wondered at their enthusiasm. He was aggrieved and annoyed, though he might have reflected that each of them was just passing through a spiritual crisis such as does not come often in a lifetime. But though Rakitin was very sensitive about everything that concerned himself, he was very obtuse as regards the feelings and sensations of others, partly from his youth and inexperience, partly from his intense egoism. "You see, Alyosha," Grushenka turned to him with a nervous laugh, "I was boasting when I told Rakitin I had given away an onion, but it's not to boast I tell you about it. It's only a story, but it's a nice story. I used to hear it when I was a child from Matryona, my cook, who is still with me. It's like this. Once upon a time there was a peasant woman, and a very wicked woman she was, and she died and did not leave a single good deed behind. The devils caught her and plunged her into the lake of fire. So her guardian angel stood and wondered what good deed of hers he could remember to tell to God. She once pulled up an onion in her garden, said he, and gave it to a beggar woman. And God answered, 'You take that onion then, hold it out to her in the lake, and let her take hold and be pulled out. And if you can pull her out of the lake, let her come to paradise. But if the onion breaks, then the woman must stay where she is.' The angel ran to the woman and held out the onion to her. 'Come,' said he, 'catch hold and I'll pull you out.' And he began cautiously pulling her out. He had just pulled her right out, when the other sinners in the lake, seeing how she was being drawn out, began catching hold of her so as to be pulled out with her. But she was a very wicked woman, and she began kicking them. 'I'm to be pulled out, not you. It's my onion, not yours.' As soon as she said that, the onion broke, and the woman fell into the lake, and she's burning there to this day. So the angel wept and went away. So that's the story, Alyosha. I know it by heart, for I am that wicked woman myself. I boasted to Rakitin that I had given away an onion, but to you I'll say I've done nothing but give away one onion all my life. That's the only good deed I've done. So don't praise me, Alyosha. Don't think me good. I'm bad. I'm a wicked woman, and you make me ashamed if you praise me. Hey, I must confess everything. Listen, Alyosha, I was so anxious to get hold of you that I promised Rakitin 25 rubles if he would bring you to me. Stay, Rakitin. Wait." She went with rapid steps to the table, opened a drawer, pulled out a purse, and took from it a 25-ruble note. What nonsense, cried Rakitin, disconcerted. "Take it, Rakitin, I owe it you. There's no fear of you refusing it. You asked for it yourself," and she threw the note to him. "Likely I should refuse it," boomed Rakitin, obviously abashed, but carrying off his confusion with a swagger. "That will come in very handy. Fools are made for wise men's profit. And now hold your tongue, Rakitin. What I'm going to say now is not for your ears. Sit down in that corner and keep quiet. You don't like us, so hold your tongue." "What should I like you for?" Rakitin snarled, not concealing his ill humor. He put the 25-ruble note in his pocket, and he felt ashamed at Alyosha seeing it. He had reckoned on receiving his payment later, without Alyosha's knowing of it, and now, feeling ashamed, he lost his temper. Till that moment he had thought it discreet not to contradict Grushenka too flatly in spite of her snubbing, since he had something to get out of her. But now he too was angry. "One loves people for some reason, but what have either of you done for me? You should love people without a reason, as Alyosha does. How does he love you? How has he shown it, that you make such a fuss about it?" Grushenka was standing in the middle of the room. She spoke with heat, and there were hysterical notes in her voice. "Hush, Rakitin, you know nothing about us, and don't dare to speak to me like that again. How dare you be so familiar? sit in that corner and be quiet, as though you were my footman. And now, Alyosha, I'll tell you the whole truth, that you may see what a wretch I am. I'm not talking to Rakitin, but to you. I wanted to ruin you, Alyosha. That's the holy truth. I quite meant to. I wanted to so much that I bribed Rakitin to bring you. And why did I want to do such a thing? You knew nothing about it, Alyosha. You turned away from me. If you passed me, you dropped your eyes. And I've looked at you 100 times before today. I began asking everyone about you. Your face haunted my heart. He despised me, I thought. He won't even look at me. And I felt it so much at last that I wondered at myself for being so frightened of a boy. I'll get him in my clutches and laugh at him. I was full of spite and anger. Would you believe it? Nobody here dares talk or think of coming to Agrafena Alexandrovna with any evil purpose. Oh, Kuzma is the only man I have anything to do with here. I was bound and sold to him. Satan brought us together. But there has been no one else. But looking at you, I thought, I'll get him in my clutches and laugh at him. You see what a spiteful cur I am, and you called me your sister. And now that man who wronged me has come, I sit here waiting for a message from him. And do you know what that man has been to me? 5 years ago, when Kuzma brought me here, I used to shut myself up that no one might have sight or sound of me. I was a silly slip of a girl. I used to sit here sobbing. I used to lie awake all night thinking, where is he now, the man who wronged me? He is laughing at me with another woman, most likely. If only I could see him. If I could meet him again, I'd pay him out. I'd pay him out. At night, I used to lie sobbing into my pillow in the dark, and I used to brood over it. I used to tear my heart on purpose and gloat over my anger. I'll pay him out. I'll pay him out. That's what I used to cry out in the dark. And when I suddenly thought that I should really do nothing to him, and that he was laughing at me then, or perhaps had utterly forgotten me, I would fling myself on the floor, melt into helpless tears, and lie there shaking till dawn. In the morning, I would get up more spiteful than a dog, ready to tear the whole world to pieces. And then what do you think? I began saving money. I became hard-hearted, grew stout, grew wiser, would you say? No. No one in the whole world sees it. No one knows it. But when night comes on, I sometimes lie as I did 5 years ago, when I was a silly girl, clenching my teeth and crying all night, thinking, I'll pay him out. I'll pay him out. Do you hear? Well then, now you understand me. A month ago a letter came to me. He was coming. He was a widower. He wanted to see me. It took my breath away. Then I suddenly thought, if he comes and whistles to call me, I shall creep back to him like a beaten dog. I couldn't believe myself. Am I so abject? Should I run to him or not? And I've been in such a rage with myself all this month that I am worse than I was 5 years ago. Do you see now, Alyosha, what a violent, vindictive creature I am? I've shown you the whole truth. I played with Mitya to keep me from running to that other. Hush, Rakitin. It's not for you to judge me. I'm not speaking to you. Before you came in, I was lying here waiting, brooding, deciding my whole future life, and you can never know what was in my heart. Yes, Alyosha, tell your young lady not to be angry with me for what happened the day before yesterday. Nobody in the whole world knows what I'm going through now, and no one ever can know, for perhaps I shall take a knife with me today. I can't make up my mind. And at this tragic phrase, Grushenka broke down, hid her face in her hands, flung herself on the sofa pillows, and sobbed like a little child. Alyosha got up and went to Rakitin. Misha, he said, don't be angry. She wounded you, but don't be angry. You heard what she said just now. You mustn't ask too much of human endurance. One must be merciful. Alyosha said this at the instinctive prompting of his heart. He felt obliged to speak, and he turned to Rakitin. If Rakitin had not been there, he would have spoken to the air. But Rakitin looked at him ironically, and Alyosha stopped short. You were so primed up with your elders' teaching last night that now you have to let it off on me, Alexei. Man of God, said Rakitin, with a smile of hatred. Don't laugh, Rakitin. Don't smile. Don't talk of the dead. He was better than anyone in the world, cried Alyosha, with tears in his voice. I didn't speak to you as a judge, but as the lowest of the judged. What am I beside her? I came here seeking my ruin, and said to myself, what does it matter? In my cowardliness, but she, after 5 years in torment, as soon as anyone says a word from the heart to her, it makes her forget everything, forgive everything, in her tears. The man who has wronged her has come back. He sends for her, and she forgives him everything, and hastens joyfully to meet him, and she won't take a knife of her. She won't. No, I'm not like that. I don't know whether you are, Misha, but I'm not like that. It's a lesson to me. She is more loving than we. Have you heard her speak before of what she has just told us? No, you haven't. If you had, you'd have understood her long ago. And a person insulted the day before yesterday must forgive her too. She will, when she knows, and she shall know. This soul is not yet at peace with itself. One must be tender with it. There may be a treasure in that soul. Alyosha stopped, because he caught his breath. In spite of his ill humor, Rakitin looked at him with astonishment. He had never expected such a tirade from the gentle Alyosha. She's found someone to plead her cause. Why? Are you in love with her? Agrafena Alexandrovna, are monks really in love with you? You've made a conquest, he cried, with a coarse laugh. Grushenka lifted her head from the pillow and looked at Alyosha with a tender smile shining on her tear-stained face. Let him alone, Alyosha, my cherub. You see what he is. He is not a person for you to speak to. Mikhail Osipovich. She turned to Rakitin. I meant to beg your pardon for being rude to you, but now I don't want to. Alyosha, come to me. Sit down here. She beckoned to him with a happy smile. That's right. Sit here. Tell me. She shook him by the hand and peeped into his face, smiling. Tell me, do I love that man or not? The man who wronged me, do I love him or not? Before you came, I lay here in the dark, asking my heart whether I loved him. Decide for me, Alyosha. The time has come. It shall be as you say. Am I to forgive him or not? But you have forgiven him already, said Alyosha, smiling. Yes, I really have forgiven him, Grushenka murmured thoughtfully. What an abject heart, to my abject heart. She snatched up a glass from a table, emptied it at a gulp, lifted it in the air and flung it on the floor. The glass broke with a crash. A little cruel line came into her smile. Perhaps I haven't forgiven him, though, she said, with a sort of menace in her voice, and she dropped her eyes to the ground as though she were talking to herself. Perhaps my heart is only getting ready to forgive. I shall struggle with my heart, you see, Alyosha. I've grown to love my tears in these 5 years. Perhaps I only love my resentment, not him. Well, I shouldn't care to be in his shoes, hissed Rakitin. Well, you won't be, Rakitin. You'll never be in his shoes. You shall black my shoes, Rakitin. That's the place you are fit for. You'll never get a woman like me. And he won't either, perhaps. Won't he? Then why are you dressed up like that? Said Rakitin, with a venomous sneer. Don't taunt me with dressing up, Rakitin. You don't know all that is in my heart. If I choose to tear off my finery, I'll tear it off at once, this minute, she cried in a resonant voice. You don't know what that finery is for, Rakitin. Perhaps I shall see him and say, have you ever seen me look like this before? He left me a thin, consumptive crybaby of 17. I'll sit by him, fascinate him, and work him up. Do you see what I'm like now? I'll say to him, well, and that's enough for you, my dear sir. There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip. That may be what the finery is for, Rakitin. Grushenka finished with a malicious laugh. I'm violent and resentful, Alyosha. I'll tear off my finery. I'll destroy my beauty. I'll scorch my face, slash it with a knife, and turn beggar. If I choose, I won't go anywhere now to see anyone. If I choose, I'll send Kuzma back all he has ever given me tomorrow, and all his money, and I'll go out charring for the rest of my life. You think I won't do it, Rakitin? That I would not dare to do it? I would. I could do it directly. Only don't exasperate me. And I'll send him about his business. I'll snap my fingers in his face, and he shall never see me again. She uttered the last words in an hysterical scream, but broke down again, hid her face in her hands, buried it in the pillow, and shook with sobs. Rakitin got up. It's time we were off, he said. It's late. We shall be shut out of the monastery. Grushenka leapt up from her place. Surely you don't want to go, Alyosha, she cried, in mournful surprise. What are you doing to me? You've stirred up my feeling, tortured me, and now you leave me to face this night alone. He can hardly spend the night with you, though if he wants to, let him. I'll go alone, Rakitin scoffed jeeringly. Hush, evil tongue, Grushenka cried angrily at him. You never said such words to me as he has come to say. What has he said to you so special? Asked Rakitin irritably. I can't say. I don't know. I don't know what he said to me. It went straight to my heart. He has wrung my heart. He is the first, the only one who has pitied me. That's what it is. Why did you not come before, you angel? She fell on her knees before him as though in a sudden frenzy. I've been waiting all my life for someone like you. I knew that someone like you would come and forgive me. I believed that. Nasty as I am, someone would really love me, not only with a shameful love. What have I done to you? Answered Alyosha, bending over her with a tender smile, and gently taking her by the hands. I only gave you an onion. Nothing but a tiny little onion. That was all. He was moved to tears himself as he said it. At that moment there was a sudden noise in the passage. Someone came into the hall. Grushenka jumped up, seeming greatly alarmed. Fenya ran noisily into the room, crying out, "Mistress, mistress, darling, a messenger has galloped up," she cried, breathless and joyful. "A carriage from Mokrow for you. Timothy, the driver, with 3 horses. They are just putting in fresh horses. A letter. Here's the letter, mistress." A letter was in her hand, and she waved it in the air all the while she talked. Grushenka snatched the letter from her and carried it to the candle. It was only a note, a few lines. She read it in one instant. "He has sent for me," she cried, her face white and distorted, with a wan smile. "He whistles. Crawl back, little dog." But only for one instant she stood as though hesitating. Suddenly the blood rushed to her head and sent a glow to her cheeks. "I will go," she cried. 5 years of my life. Goodbye. Goodbye, Alyosha. My fate is sealed. Go. Go, leave me, all of you. Don't let me see you again. Grushenka is flying to a new life. Don't you remember evil against me either, Rakitin. I may be going to my death. Ugh, I feel as though I were drunk." She suddenly left them and ran to her bedroom. "Well, she has no thoughts for us now," grumbled Rakitin. "Let's go, or we may hear that feminine shriek again. I'm sick of all these tears and cries." Alyosha mechanically let himself be led out. In the yard stood a covered cart. Horses were being taken out of the shafts. Men were running to and fro with the lantern. 3 fresh horses were being led in at the open gate. But when Alyosha and Rakitin reached the bottom of the steps, Grushenka's bedroom window was suddenly opened, and she called in a ringing voice after Alyosha. "Alyosha, give my greetings to your brother Mitya and tell him not to remember evil against me, though I have brought him misery. And tell him too, in my words, Grushenka has fallen to a scoundrel, and not to you, noble heart. And add too, that Grushenka loved him only 1 hour, only 1 short hour she loved him. So let him remember that hour all his life. Say, Grushenka tells you too." She ended in a voice full of sobs. The window was shut with a slam. Growled Rakitin, laughing. "She murders your brother Mitya and then tells him to remember it all his life. What ferocity!" Alyosha made no reply. He seemed not to have heard. He walked fast beside Rakitin as though in a terrible hurry. He was lost in thought and moved mechanically. Rakitin felt a sudden twinge as though he had been touched on an open wound. He had expected something quite different by bringing Grushenka and Alyosha together. Something very different from what he had hoped for had happened. "He is a Pole, that officer of hers," he began again, restraining himself. "And indeed he is not an officer at all now. He served in the customs in Siberia, somewhere on the Chinese frontier. Some puny little beggar of a Pole, I expect. Lost his job, they say. He's heard now that Grushenka saved a little money, so he's turned up again. That's the explanation of the mystery." Again, Alyosha seemed not to hear. Rakitin could not control himself. "Well, so you've saved the sinner," he laughed spitefully. "Have you turned the Magdalene into the true path? Driven out the 7 devils, eh? So you see the miracles you were looking out for just now have come to pass." "Hush, Rakitin," Alyosha answered with an aching heart. "So you despise me now for those 25 rubles. I've sold my friend, you think? But you are not Christ, you know, and I'm not Judas." "Oh, Rakitin, I assure you I've forgotten about it," cried Alyosha. "You remind me of it yourself." But this was the last straw for Rakitin. "Damnation take you all and each of you," he cried suddenly. "Why the devil did I take you up? I don't want to know you from this time forward. Go alone, there's your road." And he turned abruptly into another street, leaving Alyosha alone in the dark. Alyosha came out of the town and walked across the fields to the monastery. Chapter 4. Cana of Galilee. It was late, according to the monastery ideas, when Alyosha returned to the hermitage. The doorkeeper let him in by a special entrance. It had struck 9 o'clock, the hour of rest and repose after a day of such agitation for all. Alyosha timidly opened the door and went into the elder's cell, where his coffin was now standing. There was no one in the cell but Father Piercy, reading the Gospel in solitude over the coffin, and a young novice Porphyry, who, exhausted by the previous night's conversation and the disturbing incidents of the day, was sleeping the deep sound sleep of youth on the floor of the other room. Though Father Piercy heard Alyosha come in, he did not even look in his direction. Alyosha turned to the right from the door to the corner, fell on his knees, and began to pray. His soul was overflowing, but with mingled feelings. No single sensation stood out distinctly. On the contrary, one drove out another in a slow, continual rotation. but there was a sweetness in his heart, and, strange to say, Alyosha was not surprised at it. Again he saw that coffin before him, the hidden dead figure so precious to him, but the weeping and poignant grief of the morning was no longer aching his soul. As soon as he came in, he fell down before the coffin as before a holy shrine. But joy was glowing in his mind and in his heart. The one window of the cell was open, the air was fresh and cool, so the smell must have become stronger if they opened the window, thought Alyosha. But even this thought of the smell of corruption, which had seemed to him so awful and humiliating a few hours before, no longer made him feel miserable or indignant. He began quietly praying, but he soon felt that he was praying almost mechanically. Fragments of thought floated through his soul, flashed like stars, and went out again at once, to be succeeded by others. But yet there was reigning in his soul a sense of the wholeness of things, something steadfast and comforting, and he was aware of it himself. Sometimes he began praying ardently. He longed to pour out his thankfulness and love. But when he had begun to pray, he passed suddenly to something else, and sank into thought, forgetting both the prayer and what had interrupted it. He began listening to what Father Percy was reading, but worn out with exhaustion, he gradually began to doze. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, read Father Percy, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called, and his disciples, to the marriage. Marriage? What's that? A marriage? Floated whirling through Alyosha's mind. There is happiness for her too. She has gone to the feast. No, she has not taken the knife. That was only a tragic face. Well, tragic faces should be forgiven. They must be. Tragic faces comfort the heart. Without them, sorrow would be too heavy for men to bear. Rakitin has gone off to the back alley. As long as Rakitin broods over his wrongs, he will always go off the back alley. But the high road, the road is wide and straight and bright as crystal, and the sun is at the end of it. Ah, what's being read? And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saved unto him. They have no wine. Alyosha heard. Ah, yes, I was missing that, and I didn't want to miss it. I love that passage. It's Cana of Galilee, the first miracle. Ah, that miracle. Ah, that sweet miracle. It was not men's grief, but their joy Christ visited. He worked his first miracle to help men's gladness. He who loves men loves their gladness too. He was always repeating that. It was one of his leading ideas. There's no living without joy, Mitya says. Yes, Mitya. Everything that is true and good is always full of forgiveness. He used to say that too. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what has it to do with thee or me? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. Do it. Gladness. The gladness of some poor, very poor people. Of course they were poor, since they hadn't wine enough even at a wedding. The historians write that, in those days, the people living about the lake of Gennesaret were the poorest that can possibly be imagined. And another great heart, that other great being, his mother, knew that he had come not only to make his great terrible sacrifice. She knew that his heart was open even to the simple, artless merrymaking of some obscure and unlearned people, who had warmly bidden him to their poor wedding. Mine hour is not yet come, he said, with a soft smile. And, indeed, was it to make wine abundant at poor weddings he had come down to earth? And yet he went and did as she asked him. Ah, he is reading again. Jesus saith unto them, Fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he saith unto them, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. But what's this? What's this? Why is the room growing wider? Ah, yes, it's the marriage, the wedding. Yes, of course. Here are the guests, here are the young couple sitting, and a merry crowd, and where is the wise governor of the feast? But who is this? Who? Again the walls are receding. Who is getting up there from the great table? What? He here too. But he's in a coffin. But he's here too. He has stood up. He sees me. He's coming here. God! Yes, he came up to him. To him, he, the little thin old man, with tiny wrinkles on his face, joyful and laughing softly. There was no coffin now, and he was in the same dress as he had worn yesterday sitting with them, when the visitors had gathered about him. His face was uncovered, his eyes were shining. How was this then? He too had been called to the feast. He too at the marriage of Cana in Galilee. Yes, my dear, I'm called, too, called and bidden. He heard a soft voice saying over him, Why have you hidden yourself here, out of sight? You come and join us, too. It was his voice, the voice of Father Zossima, and it must be he, since he called him. The elder raised Alyosha by the hand, and he rose from his knees. We are rejoicing, the little thin old man went on. We are drinking the new wine, the wine of new great gladness. Do you see how many guests? Here are the bride and bridegroom. Here is the wise governor of the feast. He is tasting the new wine. Why do you wonder at me? I gave an onion to a beggar, so I too am here. And many here have given only one onion each, only one little onion. What are all our deeds? And you, my gentle one, you, my kind boy, you too have known how to give a famished woman an onion today. Begin your work, dear one. Begin it, gentle one. Do you see our son? Do you see him? I'm afraid. I dare not look, whispered Alyosha. Do not fear him. He is terrible in his greatness, awful in his sublimity, but infinitely merciful. He has made himself like unto us from love and rejoices with us. He is changing the water into wine, that the gladness of the guests may not be cut short. He is expecting new guests. He is calling new ones unceasingly forever and ever. There they are bringing new wine. Do you see they are bringing the vessels? Something glowed in Alyosha's heart. Something filled it till it ached. Tears of rapture rose from his soul. He stretched out his hands, uttered a cry, and waked up. Again the coffin, the open window, and the soft, solemn, distinct reading of the Gospel. But Alyosha did not listen to the reading. It was strange. He had fallen asleep on his knees, but now he was on his feet, and suddenly, as though thrown forward, with 3 firm, rapid steps he went right up to the coffin. His shoulder brushed against Father Piercy without his noticing it. Father Piercy raised his eyes for an instant from his book and looked away again at once, seeing that something strange was happening to the boy. Alyosha gazed for half a minute at the coffin, at the covered, motionless dead man that lay in the coffin, with the icon on his breast and the peaked cap with the octangular cross on his head. He had only just been hearing his voice, and that voice was still ringing in his ears. He was listening, still expecting other words, but suddenly he turned sharply and went out of the cell. He did not stop on the steps either, but went quickly down. His soul, overflowing with rapture, yearned for freedom, space, openness. The vault of heaven, full of soft, shining stars, stretched vast and fathomless above him. The Milky Way ran in 2 pale streams from the zenith to the horizon. The fresh, motionless, still night enfolded the earth. The white towers and golden domes of the cathedral gleamed out against the sapphire sky. The gorgeous autumn flowers in the beds round the house were slumbering till morning. The silence of earth seemed to melt into the silence of the heavens. The mystery of earth was one with the mystery of the stars. Alyosha stood, gazed, and suddenly threw himself down on the earth. He did not know why he embraced it. He could not have told why he longed so irresistibly to kiss it all. But he kissed it weeping, sobbing, and watering it with his tears, and vowed passionately to love it forever and ever. Watered the earth with the tears of joy and loved those tears, echoed in his soul. What was he weeping over? Oh, in his rapture he was weeping even over those stars, which were shining to him from the abyss of space, and he was not ashamed of that ecstasy. There seemed to be threads from all those innumerable worlds of God, linking his soul to them, and it was trembling all over in contact with other worlds. He longed to forgive everyone and for everything, and to beg forgiveness. Oh, not for himself, but for all men, for all and for everything. And others are praying for me too, echoed again in his soul. But with every instant he felt clearly and, as it were, tangibly, that something firm and unshakable as that vault of heaven had entered into his soul. It was as though some idea had seized the sovereignty of his mind, and it was for all his life and forever and ever. He had fallen on the earth a weak boy, but he rose up a resolute champion, and he knew and felt it suddenly at the very moment of his ecstasy. And never, never, all his life long, could Alyosha forget that minute. Someone visited my soul in that hour, he used to say afterwards, with implicit faith in his words. Within 3 days he left the monastery in accordance with the words of his elder, who had bidden him sojourn in the world.